Annie's office has changed as well. It's more homey and cottagey, I would say.
Rustic.
LMC just give us a heads up.
I think
you're on.
Jeremy's trying to get on.
Oh,
It
Who
says
is?
live streaming.
Jeremy Barker, I think, is trying to get on, but he said his link's not working. And everybody-
Oh,
This is Sean from LMC. We're good to go.
Okay, thanks, Sean. Okay, welcome everybody. I want to start off by thanking LMC. They've really worked with us to try to enable a system where we're going to be able to allow people in to ask their questions. We're keeping our fingers crossed that all of the tech is going to work out, but I really do want to thank LMC for working with us to make this happen. Items to be removed from consent agenda. If a board member wishes to remove an item on the consent agenda for further discussion, a motion to remove item from the consent agenda must be made. However, once a motion and second are made for the consent agenda items listed below, simple questions can be asked regarding any of them, as you would normally do for individual resolutions. Consent agenda. Item A, approval of minutes from the 7/21/20 special meeting. B, approval of personnel agenda. C, approval of vendor agreements and amendments. D, acceptance of bids. And E, authorization to declare certain items obsolete or relocated. And F, acceptance of donations. Can I have a motion?
So moved.
Second?
second.
All in favor?
Aye.
Aye, and,
Jeremy is
Paul-
also trying to get in. Jeremy needs to be let in. Thanks.
Paul, do you want to read the donation? You're on mute, Paul.
Sorry, multitasking. Yeah, so the donation. So various textbooks, 14 from Sheila Thompson for the private school textbook loan program. So thank you for that donation.
Thank you, Paul. We'll move on to resolutions. Resolution for a settlement agreement and general release. Be it resolved that the Board of Education of the Mamaroneck Union Free School District herewith authorizes the superintendent of schools to execute a settlement agreement and general release between the board and employee number 01292. Can I have a motion?
So moved. Christian?
Second?
Second, Ariana.
All in favor?
Aye.
B, copy of resolution for a settlement agreement and general release. Be it resolved that the Board of Education of the Mamaroneck Union Free School District herewith authorizes the superintendent of schools to execute a settlement agreement and a general release between the board and employee number 02741. Can I have a motion?
So moved, Ariana.
Second?
Second, Christian?
All in favor?
Aye.
Thank you. Item C, side letter of agreement between the Mamaroneck Union Free School District and the Mamaroneck non-teaching custodial unit. Be it resolved that the Board of Education authorizes the superintendent of schools to execute a side letter agreement between the Mamaroneck Union Free School District and the Mamaroneck non-teaching custodial unit regarding the attendance incentive program. Can I have a motion?
So moved, Paul.
Second?
Second, Ariana.
All in favor?
Aye.
Aye.
Great. With that, Bob, we're going to turn it over to you to discuss the school reopening plans.
Thank you very much, Rena. I appreciate that. Good evening, everyone. Good evening to our community members who are participating this evening. As you know, we have been directed by the New York State Board of Regents and New York Department of Education to submit and publish school reopening plans by July 31st. This evening, as part of this meeting, we would like to update the Board of Education and the community on the broad outlines of our plans and provide specific details about our hybrid and remote learning models. We're also going to touch on operations and just give some summaries of what will be present in the plan published tomorrow, we hope. Before I begin, I would like to acknowledge the incredible effort by our district administrative team members for their hard work and commitment to students and staff and families. I also want to thank our partner, the Mamaroneck Teachers Association, the leadership, President Janet Knight, and all of our other employee units for their ongoing collaboration and effort to develop sound plans for the reopening of schools. Over the course of the last several months, we've engaged teachers, students, parents, I would say health agencies and organizations in thoughtful conversations about how to best organize for school this fall. We're going to continue to seek feedback and respond to questions about our rationale, our plans, our protocols as we advance and move closer to, we hope, a decision by Governor Cuomo to open schools and anticipation of the first day of school in September.
Bob, I'm sorry for interrupting. I'm just getting a bunch of texts that that people are in a waiting room, but there are two separate links. One to be able to watch the meeting and the other to join the waiting room to ask questions. Is that correct? LMC?
My understanding, correct. If they're in the waiting room, they're waiting to ask their questions, but in order to actually watch the meeting, they would have to go either on lmcmedia.org or on channel 76 for Optimum or 35 for Verizon.
Okay. I will let people know that.
Okay, I'll continue. I want to begin tonight to emphasize that our primary focus is and will continue to be the health and safety of students, staff, and families. And therefore, we'll continue in the coming weeks to explore resources to improve safety and minimize risk. I know that Director of Facilities Steve Brugge and our Assistant Superintendent for Business Operation, Sylvia Wallach, are continually day to day trying to understand what else we can do as a school system to minimize any type of health and safety risk, as well as Assistant Superintendent for Student Support Services, Dr. Nora Mazzoni, working with our health professionals to understand what we can do to plan effectively. This evening, as part of my presentation, I'll be joined by our assistant superintendents and elementary principal for Murray Avenue School, Dr. Colleen Melnick, our Hommocks Middle School principal, Dr. Albert Sacchi, and our Mamaroneck High School principal, Ms. Elizabeth Klain. So thank you as well for joining and being a part of this. So I'm going to start off by re-emphasizing what I just said, that our number one priority in developing plans is the health and safety of children and staff. The principles that really are guiding the work to plan for the fall is that we're building all of our plans or basing all of our decision-making on safe operations of school. We continue, as I said, to invest in resources to minimize risk. And in the plan, and I think through future presentations, we'll talk about improvements to HVAC systems, the monitoring of health screening processes and protocols, and the cleaning of our schools. We seek to routinize and sustain training protocols and daily screenings, and I would want to thank Dr. Barker for his efforts to kind of build in for our summer programs and the summer operations, the training videos and the assurances that all employees and visitors will follow the protocols for health and safety. You'll hear us talking tonight about the need to adhere to social distancing guidelines and wearing masks at all times. Even today, it was brought up that under the New York State Department of Ed guidelines, that it's recommended to wear masks. It is our, what I would say, expectation that all staff members and students will wear masks at all times when they're in school buildings as we reopen school this fall. We continue to coordinate with health agencies and medical personnel. I want to certainly acknowledge the efforts and the collaboration of Dr. Ann England, our district physician, our nurse supervisor, Dina Murphy, and also currently our ESY nurse, Madeline Lucas, who's been a tremendous asset and help as we've maintained a summer program and really been able to test out protocols for about 90 students this summer. And finally, we are committed to effective communication between school and home, and working with the Director of Information and Communication and Community Engagement, Debbie Mineta. We are launching and continuing to emphasize continual communication so everyone is well informed and aware of what to expect in this time of uncertainty. I'm going to turn things over to Annie Ward, our Assistant Superintendent for Curriculum and Instruction. Annie, if you'd like to just focus in on and just talk about our ed priorities and how we framed our thinking.
Good evening, everyone. Sure. So just as Bob mentioned, the physical safety and well-being of students and faculty and families, these are our top educational priorities. And interestingly, as we put together this list, we think that each of these things holds true whether students are physically with us in school or are learning remotely at home as part of our hybrid plan that you'll hear a little bit more about as we move through the slides. So first and foremost, we're seeking always to nurture children's social and emotional well-being. We know that the challenges of this spring of remote learning have been really stressful on children, on families, and so welcoming them back and reestablishing contact and supportive rituals and comforting routines is going to be so important, and helping reestablish those social relationships between and among kids, but also among the adults, welcoming the adults back to our buildings. So we're giving a lot of thought to how we're going to do that in the most warm and safe way possible at every level. We have learned, not that we didn't know it already, but we've just seen time and time again, the real power of small group, and now this word that we use over and over now, synchronous interactions. And by that, we just mean people being together at the same time and space, whether that space is literal in a classroom, physical, or whether it's the kind of conversation that we're having now where we are all together on the same screen and focused on the same set of slides. So interestingly, that small group, which we know is sort of necessary based on the safety precautions, the social distancing that Bob just mentioned, we also know is really good from a learning standpoint and from a pedagogy standpoint, enabling teachers, once we form these smaller learning pods, as we're calling them, which are about roughly half the size at each level as a normal class would be. All of those faces can fit on a screen, and all of those children can fit safely into a classroom. So in every iteration of our plan, we're really seeking to maximize the power of those small group and therefore very supportive interactions. All of this, we think, is going to help us foster, as I mentioned at the outset, that all important sense of community, that sense of belonging. We've been apart, we've been separate now for many months. And so a lot of thought is being given at every level of the system to how we reestablish that sense of community and belonging. We know that it's really going to be important, as soon as it is safe and appropriate to do so, to begin that process of assessing where kids are in their learning, in their proficiency, in their mastery, what skills and concepts they've retained or perhaps even deepened during the remote learning time and over the summer, but where we see there may have been some gaps, or even that word that we often hear about, slide. We often hear the word slide associated with summer reading loss, but now we're hearing that phrase and thinking about that phrase of COVID slide. Oh, That's not from me, is it? Some feedback? So at every level, we are exploring department chairs, administrators, coaches, teachers. We are giving thought as a system to what the most efficient and illuminating assessments are, particularly assessments where there's going to be the ability to pull data from in-person assessments as well as electronic tools. And there are some specific examples of that that may come up later. We know that when we went out for remote learning with our very abrupt closure in the spring, we know that that in some cases the curriculum took a pause, the regular curriculum, the approach to assessments that would have been looming, state assessments, regents, et cetera, went on temporary hold. But now that we know we're planning for the long haul, so to speak, of this academic year, we're thinking about how to really re-enter the curriculum, how to focus back on curriculum standards, but in ways that are appropriate for the conditions that we're going to find ourselves in. At the elementary level, you've heard Dr. Melnick, and you'll hear her again tonight, mention our focus on literacy and math. At the secondary level, you'll hear from Dr. Sacchi and from Ms. Klain about our desire to really preserve the breadth and the vibrancy of our programs in the elective areas, the encore areas, et cetera, which we know are just so captivating to kids. But meanwhile, we're also recognizing the vital importance of building digital fluency and digital citizenship skills, making sure that kids have the tools they need and the skills that they need in order to really participate fully in what is likely to be this hybrid scenario where they're going back and forth from live learning with their peers and teachers in school to then more remote learning at home to round out the hybrid plan, how they participate actively and responsibly. I had the chance to visit the virtual co-op program earlier this week and just have a lot of thoughts based on that, interacting both with kids and our counselors and of course the STEM Alliance team that is behind that innovative program is really giving us a lot of advanced look of things that we can emphasize as we reopen this fall. And ultimately, our goal is really to bring kids back to school with each other and with us for the greatest extent possible that is safe. And we're just very excited to unveil these plans and to report them to the state in the sincere hope that we will be able to move forward in some form of a hybrid in September.
Thank you, Amy. So I want to set the table in many respects, and certainly over the last several weeks, I've appreciated the community suggestions, the comments, the questions about our planning and thinking about the reopening of schools. And it's important to point out, and this came to me clear today in joining a regional conversation with superintendents, that all of our school districts are operating with specific constraints that are unique to our communities. And so as we are thinking about and certainly going through the planning process, we want to make sure that we understand two things: that we are open to creative and innovative ideas around organizing learning for the fall, and two, that we appreciate the questions and the ongoing feedback from our community members, our parents, our employees about ways in which we can, in some ways, optimize learning and thinking about use of facilities and so on. But there are a number of operational constraints, and I just want to touch on several of them. One, clearly through the guidelines, both from the Department of Health and the Department of Education, we are to enforce social distancing and safety guidelines in our schools. And I would say if they were not a mandate, we would certainly adhere to them, knowing that health and safety is our priority. And so part of that has to do with understanding how many students can come into school at any time within any space in our plans. At the same time, we are a unique district in our region. We are one of a handful of districts that have continued to experience increasing, or I would say static enrollment in our schools. And so you take the variable of growing enrollment, and then the next bullet of building capacity, And we are a school district that at the elementary level, 3 of our 4 schools are almost at full capacity in terms of space. And also we have school buildings that are not sprawling campuses in rural or country areas, but we have schools that are built in confined areas and are historic buildings that have a variety of square footage limitations. So when you think about social distancing rules, and you think about enrollment, and you think about space, all of these things are working against us around the creative opportunities to think differently. In addition to that, while the State Department of Education has really promoted the idea of thinking differently about space and seeking what I would say the opportunity to secure space in municipal areas and buildings, use of outdoor facilities. At the same time, there are a series of regulations and requirements that even with the use of tents with sides that would allow us to really engage consistently or depend on outdoor spaces, there is a host of regulations that really make it difficult or improbable to be able to rely on that for creative operational opportunities. Ideally, also, we would love to expand our teaching force and bring in more educators to kind of as a multiplier. But we also have the realities or constraints of a fixed budget and the looming crisis around declining revenue and state aid that has not yet been determined, loss of revenue in the area of use of facilities that we predict, but also contract provisions that really we need to adhere to and work within. So this really speaks to a series of operational constraints that is really something we have to consider as we develop plans. At the same time, there are a number of certainties. I've said in my communications to our parents and staff that we're kind of building the plane while not understanding what I would say the rules of flying. That there are, as you know, the governor several weeks ago announced the timeline for determining whether we will open school. That was followed by in mid-July with the release of guidelines. And since the date of the release, there have been a lot of questions and asked for clarification around what the roadmap and the regulations require. At the top of our list of uncertainties is understanding family preferences for in-school and remote learning. And not only understanding those preferences, but also understanding our responsibilities through the guidelines. Equally, we know that based on concerns of the pandemic and the health and safety, I would say, concerns, that we're trying to understand the parental interest for remote learning, and I'll get that into a minute, in terms of the flexibility to opt in or opt out of one of our models. I would say that one of the things that is certain that there's not talking in here, we are responsible for presenting 3 plans, one of them being full open enrollment. And we know based on the guidelines of social distancing that is not realistic unless we were to see a dramatic change in the public health crisis anytime soon. We also are waiting for and confirmation of the ability of our staff to return to work. We know that similarly, as parents have concerns and real issues around their children's medical health, we need to understand similarly with our employees, our teaching staff, their status for the return to school. I mentioned the uncertainty about state aid and the realization that we may have to adjust and have adjusted our budget based on projections for shortfalls in revenue. We are trying to, in each and every day in the run up to the beginning of school, understand who is committed to enrolling and registering for school. We've been contacted throughout the summer months with people who are raising the prospect of moving, and also those families who are considering other options or leaving the area. So there's a lot of questions and uncertainty about our overall enrollment. Obviously, the primary concern is whether this respite around the infection rate and statewide in our community will maintain itself, and we will not exceed the 5% that Governor Cuomo is concerned about in terms of being able to open our schools, and also not knowing during the period of August 1st to August 7th what the governor will decide in his directive to open schools. In many other states, based on the changing health crisis, there's talk about delaying for several weeks the official start of school. And so there is uncertainty in that area as well. I want to say up front before we go through our presentation that we've received a lot of emails and communications from parents about their options or preference or intentions to return to school in the fall. And you know, in terms of our communications around our timeline and our decision making, we know that we are committed to publishing our plans tomorrow and submitting with the state, and that we have full intention, and we'll communicate this tomorrow, to survey parents beginning next week about their intentions for the return to school. And so this is an example of the main question we're going to ask parents in the survey about intentions for fall. And as you can see, we present 3 questions based on the guidelines, and they are as follows. 1, I intend for my child to return to school for in-person instruction based on what we anticipate will be our decision to begin school with a hybrid model. The second question, I intend to seek full remote learning plan for my child due to his/her documented medical condition. It is within the guidelines that parents can produce medical information that will determine their preference to have their child, his or her child, remain at home through the course of the school year and access remote learning. And then finally, the third option that we recognize and that we've received questions about is an intention to homeschool a child based on the Part 100 regulations. As far as we know right now, those are the 3 options that the guidelines speak to relative to the intentions for parents. However, we know that many parents in our community and in nearby communities are thinking about and considering about voluntarily intending to have their child remain at home, and have asked the question about whether the school district will provide the option of full remote learning. And so we intend to next week ask and really find out for each individual family and child that if the district is able to offer a full remote learning option, would parents choose that option as their primary option for accessing the schools? And so I want to say there is a lot of uncertainty. There needs to be a lot of clarification from the Department of Education that we are seeking, not only in our community, but in surrounding school districts. But the next step for us beyond submitting the plan next week is to ask parents to fill out this for every child so that we can have this information. It's critically important to know that we know that districts that have surveyed parents in early July have finding now that there's been a lot of change in decision making, that certainly we want to have parents have the opportunity to understand our plans, to publish them so they can really recognize what is included in terms of our program. But we know that we want to understand how a decision by an individual family for a child may affect our total enrollments, how many students we can have in school at any time, and what this would mean in our planning over the next several weeks. So this is an iterative process. The next step for us is the importance of asking parents what they intend for school going forward. Okay, I'm going to turn things over to Ms. Sylvia Wallach, our Assistant Superintendent for Business Operations. And we'd like to just, before we get into the instructional portion, just highlight some key initiatives or components of our school operation consideration. So yeah, I don't know.
Can you hear me?
Yes, thank you.
Okay, sorry. I had to be on mute in case anybody barks. So for child nutrition, we will continue to do what we've been doing since the closure. We will be distributing food to students daily, Monday through Friday, and then Friday will be for the 3 days. And so students that are in the morning sessions, they will receive lunch for that day and breakfast for the next when they leave each day. So the students that are in the afternoon sessions will receive breakfast and lunch for the following day when they leave in the late afternoon. We will continue to prepare appropriate meals for students with allergies, and the district will continue to use a grab-and-go system. Aramark has been a wonderful partner to us and has managed this since we closed. Actually, during the summer, we are providing meals not only to our district, but to Mamaroneck, Harrison, Byram Hills, and Chappaqua. And so that helps to support our program as well, and it helps the other districts that have students with needs for the meals. And the plan is to not have students eat on the school grounds. So we hope that everyone will be taking their meals on their way out of the building, and will eat them after they leave or before they come.
And just to add, we will obviously reach out to families to just be able to communicate, as Sylvia has mentioned, our plans to ensure that everyone is well aware of the opportunity to submit an application for the child nutrition program as well. And so that's important. I also want to just thank Aramark and acknowledge their commitment this spring and throughout the summer to partner with us to ensure that we serve daily meals to well over 600 students. And I would say that we have served tens of thousands of meals really through the spring and continuing this summer. So thank you, Sylvia, for helping us with that. Okay, I also want to ask that if you talk about our transportation program as part of our plan.
You really did move my slide. All right, so the transportation, the guidelines for transportation are somewhat different than the guidelines for in-school instruction, in that they really say do what you can do, make sure everyone wears a mask. We are fairly confident that the number of students on each bus will be reduced. We expect most schools to be on a reduced attendance plan, and we also expect many parents to opt out of transportation. But for those who ride with us, the buses will be clean and disinfected between the morning and afternoon runs. And then when temperatures are above 45 degrees Fahrenheit, the school buses will be open with windows open, with roof hatches open, to ensure that fresh air is coming in. The bus drivers and attendants will be required to wear masks and gloves. And they will also be instructed to wash their hands with soap and water before and after all bus runs. But in terms of washing hands, please note that hand sanitizer is not allowed on the bus. It is combustible and it is not allowed on the bus. Students will maintain appropriate distance when they are embarking and disembarking the bus. The bus will be loaded front to back to front, so that students aren't passing one another, and unloaded front to back. And the bus routing will be done based on the schedules, based on the hybrid models that you have been seeing. And again, for those accessing the public transportation, Metro North and Beeline buses, we will remind them in the messages that we send out to wear masks and practice social distancing on public transportation.
Thank you, Sylvia. And we will continue to publish our transportation protocols as well as our nutrition protocols and all, what I would say, operational health and safety protocols, not only in our plan, but in terms of ensuring that we sustain that practice throughout for students and families and our staff as well.
And Bob, can I just add one thing on the nutrition? The applications for the 2021 school year for free and reduced meals are going out on Tuesday, so people will keep an eye out for those.
Thank you.
Bob, just a quick clarification on the cleaning of the buses. I assume it's between each run. So if they do a pickup drop off and a pickup drop off, it'll be cleaned in between each of those.
Right, between each run.
Okay.
Thank you. So next I would like to just turn things over to Dr. Norm Zoni, who will talk about or summarize the key elements of our student support services, special education, and mental health elements of the plan.
Sure. Thanks, Bob. Can everybody hear me?
Yes.
Great, good. So good evening, everybody. So as we enter into this new school year, while we're still grappling with many of the uncertainties that Dr. Sheps mentioned, I think it's important for parents of students with disabilities to know what to anticipate as we reopen, and also as it was reflected in the guidelines provided by New York State. Our goal, of course, is to provide special education services as written in the student's IEP to the greatest degree that we can possible, considering the instructional models and the platforms that are in use by the district. Our building administrative teams and coordinators have spent so much time already considering how special ed services can overlay on the plans that you'll hear about in just a little while. But there's no doubt that flexibility in the delivery of services must exist to some degree until we return to normal operating conditions sometime, hopefully in the near future. This might mean that we continue to experience variations in the mode of delivery, whether it's virtual or in person, the size of a particular cohort because of social distancing, or even the duration of a service session. But our priority is certainly to provide as much synchronous instruction as possible, whether we're on site or whether we're in remote capacity. These are mandated services, and there's only so many ways and sections and minutes in a day and within a staff's contractual working hours. So still there are times where there are going to have to be choices made. Although most certainly, I believe from the work that I've already seen that my colleagues have done, less than we had to experience last spring. So therefore, what parents can expect is in the beginning of the year, individual service providers will actually contact you and make you aware of how and when your services are being delivered for each of your children. And like traditional school, we know we can't always accommodate scheduling preferences, although we will try to work with you to the extent that's possible. Of course, accommodations and modifications which ensure access to the general education curriculum will always be provided, and that includes those that are currently on 504 accommodation plans. You can go ahead and advance, please. Our priority is really, and also as reflected in the mandates, is on in-person and regular on-site services for our students that are most significantly and disabled, most of which are currently in our special classes. We'll also look to employ some new tools to help us monitor progress on IEP goals. And parents will receive more regular communication about not only how to strengthen that homeschool partnership and our efforts to kind of co-support children, but also to provide more clarity on just how things are going. What are we working on? What have we had to fine tune? And our remaining reevaluations that were put off from last spring and any new initial eligibility assessments will be completed through the use of a combination of in-person and validated tele-assessment tools that we've been exploring. This summer alone, you should know, since school closure, we have caught up on the majority of initial eligibility evaluations from last year, over 40. And I do have to say thank you to the staff that have come on site and have been working around the clock really to make that happen. And finally, you can expect the Committee on Special Education meetings will continue to be held virtually until further notice. And parents can either call in or participate as they did this year on WebEx using audio and video as well. From the mental health perspective, mental health is at the forefront of all of our planning, as Annie mentioned at the beginning of this. We know that many of our students and families have been significantly impacted by this crisis. And we're actively working on ways to assess and monitor and support their emotional resilience as they return to our schools in September. When we first closed, a district-wide crisis team composed of guidance counselors, school psychologists, social workers, and outside mental health agencies such as the Larchmont Mamaroneck Community Counseling Center, Bereavement Center of Westchester, Community Resource Center, and Larchmont Friends of the Family was established. And that group met weekly up until June 17th. We will again continue weekly meetings for the purposes of sharing information, developing programs and resources and support, generating referrals as needed, and really as strengthening and serving as a bridge that provides a more wide range and encompassing amount of support between the school district and the Larchmont Mamaroneck community on the whole. Our guidance counselors, psychologists, and social workers will work together to identify our most vulnerable students and families, and to develop really multi-tiers of support that can make them feel like there's a safety net there for them as they come back into school. That could be anything from a daily check-in to a formalized counseling session to even a referral to the Committee on Special Education, depending on the extent of need. And even to this summer, our social workers have been manning a hotline, both email and phone, on a daily basis for families to reach out to through at any point for any potential area of insecurity: home, financial, food, and mental health. So social workers will continue to do that. They'll respond to each call, conduct a preliminary assessment of need, and make appropriate follow-up recommendations for support. But I do want to stress again that lastly, and very, very importantly, our building administrators have been working hard to plan for structures that can be embedded into our students' day, whether remotely or on site, which will serve to assess and monitor and support their social emotional learning and resilience, and give them, I think, as Annie mentioned in the beginning, a sense of reconnection and a reunification of our community. And the work won't stop there. As we continue to recognize more and more needs and more resources, we'll bring them to you. We'll make them available publicly on the website. And I know our superintendent will be communicating them out as will I. Thank you, everybody.
Thank you. So before I turn things over to Dr. Melnick to share the hybrid and remote plans for our elementary schools and speak on behalf of her colleagues across the district, I want to point out a couple of things about our planning for both hybrid and remote modeling. We recognize that, again, thinking about the constraints, that our priorities were to have, as possible, as many students in school on a day-to-day basis, that we recognize in-person learning is a priority. And as Ms. Ward has mentioned, those synchronous experiences are critically important to maintain and advance the curriculum and really focus on quality learning. And so we have, based on a number of factors, committed to a model that we think will provide for a regular routine of school. And it's important to note that we are looking at the school year strategically in time increments, and that we recognize that there may be opportunities to adjust and change our thinking and our approach based on how we start and the conditions that are presented ahead of us. And so as much as we're saying we believe and anticipate we're going to begin school using a hybrid model, again, the variables that may influence our thinking over the next several weeks, or the directives by the governor may change our thinking. But also, when we learn as we go through the month of September and October, we want to continually benchmark progress, evaluate our situation, and communicate to our families about how things are going. And certainly hear from our staff members, our teachers, who are adjusting to a very unusual experience in teaching and learning this year. And that is going to, for us, present a lot of unforeseeable challenges relative to a hybrid model or a sustained remote learning model that is standards-based and essentially committed to advancing learning over a course of 179 days of school. So with that, I'd like to introduce Dr. Colleen Melnick, principal of Murray Avenue School, who will just summarize both the hybrid and remote elementary models that we're presenting.
Thank you so much. Good evening, everybody. I'd like to share that the entire elementary administrative team have been working very closely together for the last several weeks to develop plans in accordance with certain guiding principles that include, as you've heard tonight, to provide in-person learning for every student every day, utilizing a 50% capacity AM/PM model when we're thinking about our hybrid model. We are trying to maximize the in-person teaching and learning while maintaining the highest level of health and safety. As you've heard this evening, we're prioritizing assessments of students. We're also prioritizing literacy and math upon reentry of students in September. But we fully expect to be able to transition to a fully standards-based curriculum as the year goes on. And as you just heard from Dr. Shafts, we are going to be doing that in certain time increments as we progress through the year. And finally, and certainly not least, we feel it's essential for teachers and students to be able to establish learning communities between themselves to focus on social and emotional learning and connections. You can advance the slide. So what does a day in the life look like for an elementary student in the hybrid model? The model that you're seeing would be a schedule that a child would follow in the hybrid model if they were attending the brick and mortar school during the afternoon session. So for the morning, the AM session, which we are conceptualizing as being 8:30 to 10:55, students would be participating in what we envision is an at-home learning program. So this would entail synchronous special instructions 3 out of 5 days during the week. In addition to that, they would be participating in asynchronous specials on the days that they're not participating in the live specials. They would have video support for ongoing learning objectives and projects. They would have opportunities to share student work with each other. And for grades 3 to 5, this morning time would also present synchronous live instruction for instruments, whether it's orchestra, band, etc. And we also envision that during that time, students would have opportunities to interact with each other, to work on extension activities assigned by their teachers, to work independently, or to work on with peers for any other reason or project. A child would then take a lunch break and they would attend school in the building for the afternoon session from 12:35 to 3 o'clock. So that in-school learning program would emphasize and prioritize that small group instruction that you've been hearing so much about from us. Again, we would focus on literacy, reading and writing, math, digital skills in the beginning of the year. We would expand that as the year progressed. We would be sure to be focusing on the safe collaboration with teachers and classroom peers, with that focus on social and emotional learning when they are together as a learning group. And that afternoon session would also provide opportunities for teachers and students to engage in assessment and building related services as necessary. Please advance the slide. Before I begin describing this slide, I do want to emphasize that this remote learning model and schedule that you're about to see would be the schedule and remote learning plan if the entire district would need to pivot to a fully remote option. So we were very cognizant of the feedback that we received from our families, students, and teachers about how our remote learning program went this spring. And we used a lot of that data to construct what we hope to be as a clearly defined schedule, which balances synchronous and asynchronous learning. So from 8:40 to 9 o'clock each day, everybody, all teachers and students, would engage in a live synchronous morning meeting with their classroom teacher. For the primary grades, that may include some kind of calendar activity, morning math, but for all grades K to 5, we know that that morning meeting is very important to connect and also for teachers to frame the learning for the day. From 9 o'clock to 11:30, a teacher would plan the various groups, the small groups that he or she would be working with. And so that means that students would be participating in a mix of synchronous and asynchronous instruction. We don't expect children to be sitting in front of a screen live with a teacher from 9 to 11:30 in the morning. So they would have small group instruction at some point live with their teacher. They would also have asynchronous learning assignments that they could work on perhaps with peers. And they would have a special. We would prioritize synchronous specials in the morning for certain grades and in the afternoon for other grades. There would then be an 11:30 to 12:30 lunch break for all parties. And then we would pick up our remote schedule from 12:30 to 2. And again, students would be engaged in that balance of synchronous and asynchronous instruction with their classroom teachers. From 2 o'clock to 2:30, we envision coming together at the end of the day. Just as children and teachers gathered in the morning, students and teachers would gather together, a whole class with classroom teachers from 2 to 2:30. That would provide an essential opportunity for teachers to wrap up the day, maybe clarify certain points, provide opportunities for students to share, and end the day in a meaningful manner. From 2:30 to 3, that would be time for children to complete any kind of asynchronous work that would be necessary. And we envision that 3 o'clock to 3:30 time would offer opportunities for classroom teachers and specialists to offer some version of office hours. We heard from the survey that students and families valued the office hour time, and we wanted to be sure to provide that opportunity in the remote learning model.
So thank you, Dr. Malik. I think at this point, I would turn to the board. I don't know if there are any specific questions for Dr. Malik about the hybrid model or any administrator or the remote learning as well.
Bob, could you back up one slide?
Certainly.
Please. Colleen, would you be able to just, when you were describing on the first part, the daily asynchronous specials, can you describe that again? I'm sorry.
Sure. And this is definitely a little confusing. I have to admit that. And I would like to explain that because of the enrollment size in each of the buildings, we have a different number of sections per building. At Murray Avenue School, we're at 33 sections. And if we're dividing up into a hybrid model of 50% in the morning, 50% in the afternoon, we actually have 66 sections to plan for specials. That is true for all of the elementary schools. And because of that, we are not able to provide a live synchronous special every day to children who are at home participating in the at-home learning program. We do believe that we can provide a synchronous special probably 3 out of the 5 days. So on the days that we cannot, we still will be providing a special to students as part of the at-home learning program. It will just depend on the day of the week and the schedule. And I do assume that that would vary slightly from building to building and grade to grade.
Colleen, do you want me to just add on? Just so everyone understands, when we use that term special, what we're talking about is art, music, physical education, and library. And so working with our specialist teacher coordinators and Barry Suman, our director of health, PE, and wellness, we've spent a lot of time, as Colleen just described, trying to build on the feedback that we got from the spring and to make sure that what our specialists are offering is a blend of really well-crafted lessons that might be delivered synchronously or might be recorded and delivered asynchronously. But then the feature that Colleen was just describing, which is going to be new for our hybrid model this fall, is a synchronous meeting once every, I think it could vary, but probably, Colleen, definitely every 2 weeks for every specialist with every pod. So in other words, every pod at Murray, each of the 66 pods that Colleen mentioned, will have synchronous interaction with each of the specialists on a predictable rotation. And then in addition to that, they will also be getting some asynchronous recorded lessons, which actually we had very positive feedback on from the survey. I think the other thing, and I'm not sure if you mentioned this, Colleen, but we also heard that, and this just makes sense, that students know and love the specialists in their own building. And so for that reason, we're really taking a building-based approach to the specials, and the cycle that Colleen described will be specific to each building.
One thing I'd also like to add is that we have also met with Dina Madden, our director of music for the entire school district, as well as Nancy Revich, who represented her colleagues in the art department, and had very long conversations with them about what kind of programs they would be able to provide in this at-home learning program with children as well. And we know that that live music instruction was successful in our hybrid model, and we would envision that the at-home learning program would be the opportunity for that to continue.
Any other questions from board members?
Could we go back to our other page, please? The last page we had up?
The remote learning?
Yes, just looking at the remote learning, how important is it for us to get that 9 to 11:30 and 12:30 to 2 o'clock times, to do that with fidelity only so that it doesn't revert to a check-in with the students. How are you doing with your assignments versus synchronous instruction? And I'm pretty sure you guys are already working on that, but that's important that we get that piece right.
So I'd like to address that. I agree that we need to be very explicit with our expectations for what our children are engaged in and what our teachers are doing. And it is our expectation that there will be live direct instruction happening in small synchronous groups. We heard loud and clear from our surveys that those interactions were vital for children to continue to progress across the curriculum and to make progress. And so we will address this with teachers. And one thing that I didn't mention in this model and our other model as well is we absolutely acknowledge that our teachers will need significant planning time in either of these models. And so we are prepared to offer more planning time to our teachers and support them, especially as they plan as full grade level teams in the building and across the district to provide direct instruction in small groups to children across the board in all of our curricular areas.
I think if you look at the structure of the schedule, the bookends of the morning meeting and then the wrap up at the end of the day is critically important, as well as 2 blocks, an AM and PM block of synchronous instruction that is going to provide the teacher with the flexibility of whole group, small group, individual support, as well as the support of our student support services and our specialists. I also want to mention that we know that by creating the, what I would say, end of the day office hours timing and allowing for planning time for teachers, that it is a designated time for parents to submit questions or communicate with teachers that will provide or optimize that communication and not necessarily leave it open-ended throughout the afternoon as we end the scheduled day and into the evening. So we really are looking at staying connected, establishing a consistent model of instruction and creating opportunities for a variety of experiences tied to synchronous learning.
One more question. Is the thinking that if we start in a hybrid and we end up in remote, that the pods that you are learning in the small groups in the classroom are the same, that when you break out during those chunks of time from 9 to 11:30 and in the afternoon, stay in those learning pods remotely? Is that the thinking, or no, they may mix them up at that point?
It is our thinking, Ariana, but I have to be honest with you. I think that is going to be under the purview of the teachers. They will know best how to group those children for those interactions. And so I don't think we want to prescribe for them what that would look like. But yes, what you're suggesting is, very logical and linear, and that's how we're thinking. But we'll see how that goes if we have to pivot.
I would also add that, of course, if there are integrated co-teaching classrooms and pods, so to speak, those would have to stay intact when they moved in and out of both environments.
But the other question is, which I'm sure you'll get to, is making sure we have supplies for everybody who needs them, the musical instruments, for art projects, making sure we're not just requiring parents to have that so it's equitable.
Yeah, I can respond to that, Sam, that I think one of the, again, we're so hopeful that the hybrid model will be our reality because that is going to enable the exchange of supplies and curriculum materials, et cetera. I just spoke this morning with our elementary math coach, Mariana Ivanoff. We were talking about the specific manipulatives that we would want every child to have at home that we're ordering now and able to send those home with kids so that they can learn remotely in the hybrid model. But also, as Colleen has said, if we did have to pivot, kids would be, provisioned at home with the resources they would need.
Just to piggyback to that answer, Annie, I would like to add that because we all did have the opportunity to return children's belongings to parents this spring, that functioned as a dry run for every one of us to decide how we would distribute materials to families. And while we were still maintaining social distancing, adhering to masks, etc. And I think that in every building, we were able to pull that off beautifully with very few glitches. We were so appreciative of the cooperation of our families. And I think that we all feel very confident that were to happen that we would have to distribute materials to families, we would be able to successfully do that.
So I also want to point out, because it'll come into our conversation both at the middle school and the high school, hybrid model and remote learning, that in addition to surveying parents next week about their intentions for school and for fall, we are committing to surveying families about their technology needs. We are committed to, as a district, providing a device for every child that requests one, a district issued device. And for those students and families that qualify, to provide access to a Wi-Fi hotspot. It's important that whether it's the remote or the hybrid model, that there is equity around access to technology and opportunity to learn. We have certainly planned for and invested in the purchasing of webcams for all of our classrooms. And so we anticipate that there'll be live streaming at the secondary level as part of our hybrid model. And we are planning for this pivot that would be required in terms of remote learning to ensure that all students, as Annie Ward mentioned, first of all, are building digital fluency, but also have the appropriate device per student, as well as access to internet to ensure continuity of learning and equity of opportunity to learn. Any more board questions on the elementary? Thank you. So before I turn things over to Dr. Albert Saki, and again, I want to welcome him as our new principal of Homix Middle School. I wanted to raise a point with the Board of Education and the community. Begin with, you'll see here on the slide that's consistent with our elementary and high school model. We're committed to having students attend school for half a day every day. And that, again, that fits with our guiding principles and our priorities to build a routine of school at the start of the school year and evaluate moving forward. As the board knows, historically, that we have built our team model at each grade level on the cohort size of 100 to 110 students. The school historically, over the course of the 3 grades, really functions in the team model. And back in the fall of 2019, as we anticipated the projected enrollment of 482 rising 6th graders, I recommended that we move forward and establish a 5th team for the incoming 6th grade, knowing that we wanted to maintain what I would say 100 to 110 range for our operations of schools. We consider that the impact of class sizes and how we organize learning, and to take each grade divided into equal groupings and really prioritize a more intimate school experience. As you can see in the slide ahead, the decision at the time would have been the difference between a 4-team model of enrollment of about 120 students for each team versus the 96 that we went forward with. As we think about fall 2020, there's been a significant change in the rising 7th grade enrollment. We anticipate at this point, without really officially knowing who will continue or who may leave the system, enrollment size for 7th grade around 440 students, anywhere between 435 to 445. And so as we considered about the change in thinking of our hybrid model and the goals to create opportunities for lower class size and cohorts and to be able to manage the school schedule, it is my recommendation that we move forward and for this year transition the 7th grade from 5-team model to a 4-team model. We believe that will allow us with what Dr. Saki will report out in terms of change in schedule and the number of sections to optimize the number of students who are in school at the 50% to lower class sizes and still have a consistency. And as you can see, maintaining the 5-team model with the number of students we anticipate or less would bring down the team size to 88 or less students, which would be certainly difficult to maintain in terms of staffing and budget. At this time, we anticipate that consistent with the history of our team size, that transitioning to a 4-team model will provide 110 students. When we talk about transitioning to creating 5 sections per team, that will bring our class size down from, on this grade level, from 27.5 to 22 students per class. We'll talk more about that. But it is my recommendation, and I've directed the HOMEX administrative team to convey this and to come up with a transition plan to place students onto 4 teams and to create the opportunities for guidance counselors and staff to work with parents and students to get to know them in advance of school. And I know the board may have additional questions. I'm going to turn things over to Dr. Saki and let him go through the hybrid model and the remote model, and then allow the board to come back to ask broader questions.
Well, thank you, Dr. Shaps, and good evening, everyone. I hope you're all well. And, you know, just to start off, you know, we talk about a new year and different challenges. So I think it's important for us to kind of, you know, take a step back and actually think about that. And I know that Dr. Shaps has mentioned that as well. You know, I don't think there's anything that's going to be the same about this upcoming year than we've ever seen before or that we'll probably ever see again. So, you know, just going in there, we know that this is going to be a different kind of a challenge and a different kind of a circumstance, right? But in all of this, we wanted to make sure that we were creating the safest possible model for our students and staff. So that was, you know, that's what was guiding our thinking, and that's what was guiding our practice. We've been working, you know, tirelessly with our administrative team at the HOMEX, with teachers. We had some parent representatives. We had some board participation as well, in terms of creating the best hybrid model for middle school. So, you know, and I stress that piece of middle school because I think, you know, middle school is its own unique age group. And there's certain things that our model incorporates that is beneficial for the middle school student. I also feel that, you know, going into this work, I think us working together in terms of the school community and parents is going to be critical and us getting through this next year together. As I'm sure you know, states and countries throughout the world are dealing with the exact same thing that we're dealing with here, right? And our charge is to put our heads together and come up with the safest and best way to open up school, so that our students and staff can remain safe through the process and us still have the opportunity to engage our students in learning. And I'm hopeful that we've been able to create that model as we go into it. You know, part of the things that we're thinking about in terms of prioritizing our daily attendance, you know, for middle school students specifically, you know, for the trans adolescent student, that the regular contact with staff and their peers was just a critical piece, right? So as we look at our model, we're trying to figure how do we set up a model that would make sure that students have that regular contact with their teachers and that regular contact with their peers. That was just a critical piece that we needed to make sure was evident in our model. For middle school students, again, you know, the whole idea of building community and supports for students, those were also very critical pieces that wanted to be evident in our model. So for us to be able to get to the 50%, that was just that was a critical piece, because at the 50%, that allowed our students to be in school on a daily basis. And I'll get more into that as I explain this further. When we look at, maintaining the programming offerings, Dr. Shaps had mentioned the fact that at the secondary level, part of our drive along with safety was how do we make sure that, all the extremely rich and diverse offerings of programs that our students have, we were able to maintain that even as we were going into this hybrid model. So I'm sure you all know of our very strong encore programs, our very strong related arts programs. So I'm trying to figure out a way that we can still maintain those programs. Obviously, those programs are going to look different. It cannot look the exact same way as it looks when students are there fully, but still making sure that we're able to maintain those programs was an important part for us. We also wanted to ensure that the whole idea of teams in the middle school, I think that's part of the power of the middle school structure, is the whole idea of teaming. So when we looked at our model, we wanted to make sure that the team concept was kept intact, and that we're able to maintain the team structure within our model. Dr. Shaps had mentioned the shift in our periods. So, we shifted to a 9-period school-wide schedule. So that gave us several benefits to our model. One is that it allowed our hybrid model to work to the best extent possible. It also gave us some added flexibility that our previous schedule created some limitations for. So, moving from one master schedule from the previous 3 master schedules, especially in a hybrid model, just made the most sense for us. It gave us the ability to reduce our class sizes by adding the world language to the core. And so by, the example that Dr. Shaps gave of, 100 students being divided into 4 classes, as opposed to 100 students being divided into 5 classes, giving us the number of approximately 20 students. So that's if every single student shows up in school. So depending on the students who actually come to school, that'll give us an average of anywhere from 8 to 10 students. Going back to the 7th grade piece that was mentioned, that's the one place where the numbers might be between 9 and 12 students. So we'll be mindful about the classrooms that we do choose for our 7th grade group. What the 9-period schedule also allowed us to do was to prioritize social-emotional learning and academic supports for students through our advisory/callback model. And I'll get into some of that in a minute.
If I can just interject, Dr. Saki, in your work with your team and thinking about the 9-period schedule, what was important to highlight is that the state guidelines is clear in minimizing the transitions of students. And our schedule through last year is, as you alluded to, suggests 3 schedules by 3 grades operating simultaneously. And that actually increases the transitions that occur throughout the day. And so the idea not only was to standardize the schedule, transition the schedule to 9-period to optimize learning, but also to ensure the health and safety by having the school operate in its entirety under one bell schedule and limit the movement of students, which is very different from our past experience.
Thank you, Dr. Shaps. Thank you for that clarification. The move for, going back to the 5, oh, sorry, if you go.
Sorry.
Thank you. Going back to dividing the students into adding the world language to the core was just, a very critical piece to our plan. And that allowed us, again, to get to that 50%. So, we were trying to make sure that we did have a model that gave us that 50% number. The flexibility of our model. So the way our model is currently designed, we're able to use it in a hybrid version, a full remote version, or if we went back to full school, this model can work in all three settings. In terms of targeted support for academic and SEL, at HOMICS, I know that our push and what we strive for is to ensure that every student in the school feels connected to and cared for by at least one adult inside that building. So if they were ever to have an issue, that there was that one person that they trusted and they can go to. Obviously, our expectation is that our students feel comfortable with everybody, but at least they have their go-to person inside the building. And so us being able to incorporate the idea of an advisory, especially with us coming from this long stint of students not being in school, the advisory piece was just a critical piece that we felt had to be part of our plan. So what we've been able to do is we've been able to provide both social emotional learning as well as additional academic support. So I know that during the course of the school year, students had office hours, which was normally occurring during lunchtime. In our model, when I go on to explain it, you notice that we're not having students eating lunch in school. So one of the pieces that we added to this model was to ensure that students were actually scheduled into a 40-minute time slot every other day for some form of academic support. And this academic support can be in any content area, including our encore classes. So that's just built into the child's schedule. And, the whole idea of advisory is, students having a small group of students, one advisor, that's a place where the students are going to have the opportunity and the ability to truly connect, with their advisor and truly connect with their students within that advisory. And especially for our middle school students, especially after this long time away from their peers, that was just a critical piece that we wanted to make sure was incorporated in our plan. Dr. Schaps? So just to kind of walk through our schedule, this is a sample schedule for a 6th grade student. So, school day starting at 8 o'clock. So for this child who is there in person, they're going to be attending their core academic class. So if you look at what it says on Tuesday, let's pretend that the Tuesday is the students who are home, right? So whereas the children on Monday are in core, the other half of their cohort is going to be at home, also observing that live instruction taking place. So everything that you see on Tuesday, that's what the other half of the 6th grade that is not in the core on Monday is going to be doing, right? So even where it says advisory, that's the 40-minute time slot in here. It's about 25-minute time slot that I was describing in terms of the opportunity for students to connect. So even with the kids who are in school and as well as the kids who are home, they're all going to be school-wide and advisory during that time slot. When we look at the lunch rate, some of the things that we had been thinking about was even, for example, just cleaning the building in between cohorts, right? So even with the 6th grade, depending on how our building is divided up, which is also going to be looking different as we look into next year. If we're able to cohort students by team and by grade level to sections of the building, that would allow us, for example, in the 6th grade example here, when the children are in encore, so the cleaning for their classes can probably even start in that, during that time. So that when the next group comes in, they're going into a class that's already being cleaned. And that hour spent in the middle will probably be left for like our 7th and 8th grade classrooms. Then if you look at the afternoon session, for Monday, it says that the students are attending remotely. So that's going to be the group that was at home in the morning is now coming in the afternoon. So now they're getting their live instruction. So going back to the point of making sure that there is a daily contact with students and staff, that was just important for us for our model, especially for the for our middle school students. That was just a critical piece that we had to add. Dr. Schaps. So similar to what Dr. Mamaroneck was sharing, this is if we're going full remote and everyone is at home, so we did try to model what we'd be doing, to model it to the high school model as well. So you'll notice that the period lengths have increased to about 70 minutes a period. So in the course of 2 days, students will be getting through their academic day. But what that allows us to do is that, within that 70 minutes, it allows for both synchronous instruction and asynchronous instruction as well. So students will still have the initial mini lesson from the teacher where everybody gets that tier one instruction from the teacher. Then the students have an opportunity to break off into independent or small group works remotely. We still made sure that we still built in that advisory and callback period into the full remote model as well, because again, the importance of that advisory time was just critical. And then the callback, just to make sure, knowing that, we have had, some gaps in learning from our most needy students to our most advanced students, making sure that there was time that was built into their day, that they had an opportunity to connect with the teacher for additional support. If you notice on day one for, the end of the day where it says small group, that's an opportunity for that first day for, part of our instructional day for, teachers to have an opportunity of working with smaller groups of students, to kind of, reinforce instruction that took place during that day or particular areas of the day that students might have struggled in. So that's sort of that's a lot of information, but that's sort of like our model in a nutshell.
Thank you, Dr. Sagi. It's important to point out again that we will provide the opportunity for students to request a district-issued device for technology. We plan to install webcams in all of our middle school classrooms. And so the live stream for this hybrid model for those who are learning remotely while students are in person, consistent with most schools at the secondary level in the region, going to that block schedule, an expanded block to 70 minutes allows for a variety of synchronous and small group, whole class, and asynchronous independent work as well. And so we feel this is the structure that will provide the continuity of learning and advance the curriculum in a remote setting. Any questions from board members?
Just to clarify, where it says small group, is that, who initiates that? Is that like the math teachers initiating, like asking children to join small groups, or is that a student who struggled in math reaching out? How does that get organized?
Yes, I'll definitely say that probably both, but it's going to be teacher generated, right? So that a teacher, was going through a lesson, so that a particular child was struggling, so they'll probably grab that child. The child can also say, I was kind of struggling with this area, can I join for some extra support for that day one period?
So if I can just add as well, thank you, Dr. Say, that the distinction between the callback, which may be student or teacher generated, the small group is part of the core instruction. So as we said, it would be an extension of the instructional period and organized by teachers, or as Dr. Sagi said, a student advocating to be part of it, but it is an assigned instructional period.
When you refer to in the full remote English, they would start together and then they might do individual work or small group work. Would partway through that, if a small group wants to get back to the teacher's basically live that whole time and they're going to jump from group to group? Is that sort of the idea? So It's like an active classroom just happening remotely.
Correct. So yeah, so during that time, it doesn't mean that, when they break off that the teacher is off. Now the teacher will be available, checking the chat line, making sure that, there are no questions coming up from students. If there are questions, being able to address those questions, being able to go from group to group to provide support to students. So, there is a level of support even for teachers that we're going to have to look into providing, Going back to what Dr. Mamaroneck was saying, there is going to be a level of training that is going to be needed, and a level of planning time just provided for teachers. But yes, that's what that time is. That's what that time is going to look like.
And if I can add, I want to advocate for our teachers. We expect in the hybrid model as well, as we're using tech tools, and whether that's Google Meets and Zoom or learning management and conferencing, the challenge will be for the teacher to be able to focus on the students in front of him or her, but also to connect students to class. And so that is the professional development and the support and really the understanding of the complexity of teaching in a pandemic, and that is we're trying to connect students and be creative in thinking of how, even in group work, students who are in the classroom can also connect with students who are remotely through technology, and also understand the complexity and the challenges and the impact of a teacher who has to work in across two platforms as well. So I want to be mindful of support for teachers, the reality of it, and the challenges that are going to come through a hybrid model where we're live streaming and students are both remote and students are part of a live classroom as well.
So just to add on to what Sam just asked, so are we talking about if we go pivot to a full remote model of a scenario where there is a full group and then they are assigned to breakout rooms and then the teacher visits different breakout rooms and is also able to raise a hand if there's a question needed in a certain group and then they're able to come back together? Is that what we are talking about here?
Correct. So you know, and that's why I was saying, you know, there is going to be there's going to need to be a level of PD and support for staff to make sure that they're comfortable with navigating all those systems as well. Yes.
I mean, if I could just say that the point here is that at the secondary level and elementary is to have a structure of a school day, and both obviously in hybrid but remote, that we are committed to, again, advancing the curriculum, ensuring that there is a schedule that is a full day of school. In this particular case is to take advantage of the large block of instruction where a teacher can organize, depending upon the lesson, the objective, and the work, the synchronous instruction, provide for a blend of small group, whole group, independent work, individualized instruction, and special education support. So this is the schedule. So it would be clear that in a remote setting from 8 to 2:57, teachers are working, students are working remotely.
Sorry, I don't mean to overdo. Can you just clarify that, like, if you were like in a nutshell, the difference between callback and small group? I think that's,
Annie, do you want to touch in on this, because we've had conversations with teachers as well?
Sure, yeah. And I think there is, Ariana, some latitude for this to be worked out. We had an extensive conversation with, Bob mentioned our MTA partners. We had a lengthy conversation yesterday about this. So as Bob mentioned, the small group is designed to be part of the teacher's core instructional responsibility. So presumably that would emanate from the teacher's sense, as Al described, of who might benefit from additional small group support. And that could take a variety of different forms. It could be enrichment. It could be some, so-called extra help. But it would be the teacher's discretion to set up those groups and invite children in as an extension of that core academic, class. The callback, which is nested in in that advisory slot, as Al described, is actually part of the teacher's professional duty period. Technically, that's the slot in the teacher day that it occupies. So there are some shades of difference of what sorts of activities would be most appropriate during that time. But I think it's an area that we will continue to discuss with teachers, Al and his team, with department chairs and teachers at HOMICS in order to figure out how to maximize that. It's, we were working, as Bob mentioned at the outset, the teacher contracts give us the ability to work with teachers in order to, develop what we hope will be optimal period lengths. And there is, as I think Christian and Sam just described, the ability to group kids within those 70-minute blocks. We envision that's active teaching time for our teachers, and we envision kids being in small groups, certainly, on Zoom chat rooms, et cetera. But this is just an additional provision within the teacher day to be able to, schedule as needed small groups for either enrichment or extra support.
I have a question going back, sorry, Dr. Sacchi, going back to the hybrid model.
Mm-hmm.
in terms of the time that students have. So they would have an hour to, if they're in the hybrid model and they're due to be in school, they would have an hour to get back home, eat lunch, and then participate in the remote learning. Is that how that works?
Correct. And, we've been going back and forth in terms of do we add some additional time to that hour? Obviously we can, but that would take away from the instructional time. So, that was sort of like the beginning that was.
And how does that also work with students who, I know there aren't many, but any students who are eligible for busing?
Yes.
Yep. We are looking at the routes, and certainly we're mindful of that and trying to understand how that will work. I would say that, we are taking a go slow approach here. It's ambitious in terms of our ability to try to manage the AM PM session. And we're going to have to monitor within the first 2 weeks, Rena, and just see how this transition model works overall. We are, one thing I'll say about Hummus historically, because traffic and flow, because it's half the students and there's a time in between, we hope to obviously stagger and work on a dismissal way that will provide ample time to transition to eat and get ready for the afternoon session.
Okay, thank you.
Two things. One, it's clear our teachers are going to be even more superheroes than they've ever been trying to put this all together. It will be impressive, and I'm sure it'll be hard to get started, but they'll, with professional development, rise to the occasion, and I'm thankful they'll do it. The other question is, which I know is very difficult, is there any way for, if someone loses internet where they are, or they got delayed getting home, is there going to be some provision for the recording or follow-up for students?
That's a great question. The teacher will have the opportunity and the ability to record lessons. We are going to, in the process of amending our AUP, acceptable use policies for use of technology. We need to make it clear that, teachers will be able to record and post, and it is a way to deal with the issue of flexibility within the day. So it's how do we support students and families, knowing, and to your point about the fidelity of internet access or issues with tech, but the intention here is to have conversations with teachers, the ability to record and post that lesson for students.
Yeah, thank you, Dr. Schaps. Especially that initial, tier one instruction that whether it's that, initial do now, the actual mini lesson, but giving staff the opportunity to record that so students can access that information, yes, is going to be an important piece.
I also want to say I applaud Dr. Sacchi and the administrative team, and this came up through our work at the D-Lab in terms of parents and students, the importance of advisory. This is a new concept in terms of for Hummocks, and I know that Ms. Klain will talk about the high school as well, but the guidelines by the state, for good reasons, and really emphasizing the importance of social emotional well-being, of that adult connection. We feel strongly that the introduction of an advisory program, the connection with adult students, is critically important. And so I'm pleased that this will be part of our hybrid and remote learning model. I just want to be mindful of time. And so we want to get through the high school unless there's any other questions from the board.
I guess just one last final question. Is it the intention to have teachers in the room in both the hybrid or remote model?
Well, I would say it is our intention to have teachers obviously in hybrid. The big question is, in the event that there is a change in, again, the conditions, pandemic regionally, if we have the ability through the governor's directive or our own independent ability to switch to remote based on the circumstance, we would encourage teachers, if possible, to come to school. And that's why the investment in technology around the webcams in the classroom would still provide the opportunity for a teacher to be present in the school, students to learn remotely.
Thank you.
Mm-hmm. So I'm going to move on and just ask Ms. Klein to join us. And again, consistent to our model for both at the hybrid at the secondary level is the commitment to have students attend for a portion of the day, in this particular case, 3 to 4 times per week based on 33% enrollment. But I think Ms. Klein has a lot to present and talk through about the high school models.
Thanks, Dr. Shaps. So like Dr. Melnick and Dr. Saki have already articulated, there is, we didn't include everything here because it would have been repetitious on the middle and the elementary school, right? So safety, social emotional well-being, all of these are foremost in our minds right now. The high school obviously is a different animal altogether. And so again, we're looking to get students in here as often as possible. I've had an opportunity to speak to students over the last couple of weeks through the D school, and then a group that I'm using as an advisory to me. And a lot of them are just really talking about the desire for normalcy and holding on to as many parts of Mamaroneck High School that they can. So that's really behind the decisions we have made at the high school level in maintaining their schedules. And so not taking away the things that they love. In addition, you'll see as we describe this, we also heard from students and then through the D school process that there was a strong feeling that we needed to create some kind of an advisory program at the high school. And for all the reasons that Dr. Saki articulated, that while our expectation is that students make connections with every teacher, we know that sometimes students don't do that. So the idea behind an advisory program would be that every faculty member in the high school, including all the administrators, will go ahead and really wrap our arms around 8 or 9 students. And the idea being that those 8 or 9 students, we will have a curriculum. It will look very different in 9th grade than it would in 12th grade. And perhaps I am going to use that curriculum every week, or maybe things are going to come up that a student wants to discuss. So it might be having to do with, well, what is this life like in this world right now that we're living in, and what impact is it having on my family? What impact is it having on my learning? Or there may be, if I have a 9th grade group, probably there'll be a lot having to do with organization. How do I organize myself at a high school level? What does that look like? And what is it going to look like in a hybrid model? How do I keep things straight? So we do think that personal interaction is going to be critical. We're a very, very large high school. And I think one of the questions that I've received most often, and this happens to me that, through the emails that I've been having, through phone call conversations that I've had prior to people being on vacation, they've been saying to me, well, what are you going to do about the overpass? So that is a very big concern, and parents know that from back to school night, that little area that narrows. So we do have some thoughts about that, and we are working to reduce movement in the school. So our goal is to have as much as possible, and it's not perfect, but as much as possible, a 9th and 10th grade zone, which will be the Palmer side of the building, and then an 11th and 12th grade zone, which will be the post side of the building. And then the science classrooms are remaining where they are. So that means that there will be students walking from Palmer into the science wing and from post into the science wing. So those are some of the things that we're thinking about. And if you want to go to the schedule, the reason that we are starting at the high school with the 33% model is because we need to see how a lot of these things are going to play out in real time when we have students in the building. And we do feel, we know now from having measured rooms. Thank you, Steve Brugge. Thank you, the custodians. Thank you, Mr. Washington, for going with me and measuring 6 foot. So we are literally measuring out what does it look like to have one child there, one child there. Can we get 12 in this classroom or can we get 14 in this classroom? And then figuring out, well, if we can get 14, then which teacher needs to be in that classroom? And that's the level of what we're doing right now. We believe that we can get 50% of our students into this building, but we do believe that that is going to be quite tight. So we feel more comfortable starting at the 33% model. And once we see how this rolls out and who's actually enrolling in school and who's not showing up to school and who's going to be making other decisions. And we know we just accepted, I think, something like 12 students in the last 4 weeks. So those numbers are fluctuating and they're going to throw us off. So we feel that starting with 33% with the goal of moving to 50% is something that we are interested in, is the plan that we would like to go to. So when you're looking at this, and for people who are freaking out at home, because my PTA president said to, explain why this is so difficult for parents. I think kids are going to get this in a moment. I understand that this may be difficult and I'm going to try and explain it as clear as possible, but I will be holding night meetings for 9th and 10th grade parents, 11th and 12th grade parents, and then I will show you what a sample schedule is for a student. But right now, I'm not getting into that kind of detail. So Group A is in school in the morning on Monday, and then they will leave at lunchtime, and then Group B will come in for the afternoon. When Group A is in school, Group B and Group C are going to be zoomed in. They're going to be watching the lesson. And I think that's going to be the challenging part of all of this for teachers is how am I teaching the 8, 12 kids in front of me, and then also knowing what's going on the screen with the kids at home. And so I think those are a lot of the conversations that we are going to be having. We have tested the webcam, so I know what it looks like for a student's perspective, and I also know from a teaching perspective, because I went into the classroom and stood before the webcam. You can zoom in, you can zoom out, and we do think that will be, I guess, the best in the circumstance, and we hope that our technology can support that. So if you just follow Group A for a moment, you can see that Group A will come in the morning on Monday. They won't be there in the afternoon. They'll be zoomed in. They won't be there on Tuesday. I'm going to talk about the advisory Wednesday in a moment. They will show up for one period on a Wednesday. They won't be there on the morning of Thursday, but they will be back in the building on Thursday afternoon for their afternoon classes, and then back in again on the Monday. So you can see that they will.
I think if I could just interject, Friday morning, right?
Yeah, okay. And so they will have come in 4 times over the course of that first week. You can see that Group B, it sort of evens itself out as you move along, which is why the first slide says they'll either be in there 3 or 4 times a week. Board, do you have any questions about this before I move on? That's a good sign. Okay, the advisory. So the advisory is.
Yeah, I had a question. So some classes are gonna be like the teacher is in the class and then also managing the Zoom at the same time.
Well, that's the difficult part, right? So I don't know that we can, we're figuring out what that will look like. I don't know about managing as much as them knowing they're going to need to take attendance, right? I mean, we need to know who's there. And then I think it will be that the students at home will be watching. That's what is going to be happening. The attention at that moment is on the students in front of the class.
Okay. Yeah, no, just I think it's going to be too much for that teacher be like a.
Well, I think as Ms. Clay mentioned, and I mentioned in Dr. Saki, how you navigate this dual world Prioritizing the students in front of you is critically important. But clearly, as students do independent work or group work, there's the opportunity to pause, to ask questions. But this will be the challenge for our teachers, and we recognize that. And our commitment is to find ways to support them.
Definitely, definitely.
Okay, so Advisory Wednesday, we can try to come up with a better name. If anybody has a great name, let me know. And so from 8 to 10 in the morning, this is what we're hoping for students to be able to connect with their clubs. We're hoping that this will be a point where we were going to have some kind of weekly announcements. So this will be community building, and that's going to be things that the club advisors will work with their advisees to figure out exactly what that looks like. This is a sample. So in this particular class, for this particular student, she would come in for the first period in the day, and that would come to advisory. So if it's my advisory group, I'm going to meet with them from 10 to 10:45. And we think that we're just going to schedule it. 9th grade would come in first period, 10th grade second. We'll figure that out. Then that child will go home. Clearly you can see they're not going to, 15 minutes is probably not enough time to go home. But what they're going home to is to office hours, to a club meeting. So if they're a little bit late for that, that's not the end of the world. And at that point, they have 4 periods where they are able to check in with teachers to get the help that they need, that perhaps they weren't able to get. So to your question about that's going to be difficult for the students at home, right? Yeah, I think it will be challenging, but this is my opportunity to say to the math teacher, can I come and see you second period for office hours? Because I didn't understand something yesterday in that lesson when I was at home. And so that's the idea over here, to have clarification for students and lots of opportunity to get the assistance that they would need. We also...
I'm sorry, if I could just interject. I know in your conversation with students and teachers, the importance of having a midweek is really the opportunity after 2 days to maybe pause, provide that support, and then focus on the following days of the week as well.
Correct. And then the other thing is, trying to support our very, very vibrant club life. And a lot of students, we were able to maintain some of our clubs in the spring, but we know that this is very important to students. And so we hope to be able to do that even in a more sort of organized fashion in September. So if we were to go to so this is just the hybrid model and we hope to get to 50%, right? So I think that's pretty self-explanatory. The first group would come in, group A would be in for periods 1 through 4, then they would leave, and they would do the exact same thing I just said, which is, sign on and watch the lesson. In the meantime, group B is in school, and then vice versa, right? So, I just want to remind people that at the high school, we have approximately 200 students, 180 to 200 students who have a free period on a daily basis. So we have 8 periods in the day. Most students are scheduled for 7 out of the 8 periods. It's one of the things students love about the high school. And so as we wanted to be able to preserve the schedule for students, and having those 8 periods is essential in order for us to be able to do it. But our students have also had an open campus. So we're very different than the elementary and the middle school. And quite honestly, there is going to need to be a lot of work with our students to get them to grasp that this will not be an open campus. So periods 2 and 3, if you're a student who does not normally would have had a free period, they will be in a study hall. Likewise, period 6 and 7, they would be in a study hall. So the student who has period 1 can come late to school. The student who has period 4 can leave early. But this is one of the reasons why we think it's very, very important for to move from 33 to 50%, is because part of what we're going to have to do, quite honestly, is to get our high schoolers, our seniors and our juniors, to understand that this is a very, very different high school, and very specific to the fact that we need to maintain safe conditions. So if we were to move to a remote learning, which of course none of us want, but that is, Dr. Fauci is predicting it, a lot of people are predicting it, is we would run the block schedule that we have been running, that we did a version of in the spring. Our faculty and our students said they appreciated when we moved to the block schedule. And so we would just run a straight 1 through, hold on, I gotta get rid of some of you people in my screen. A 1 through 4 schedule. And then, so this is an example of a student who would have advisory on a Monday, and then on Tuesday, they would be able to get extra help at the end of the day. So periods 1 through 4 on day 1, 5 through 8 on day 2. So advisory in this case would continue and would be assigned to a specific day of the week. So if you think about this as a 9th grade student, all 9th graders would meet with advisory on their day on Monday, and on Tuesday, Wednesday, Thursday, and Friday, they would be able to get extra help at the end of the day. On Tuesday, the 10th graders would have advisory. So, and the idea, just to piggyback off Dr. Saki, is that the first part of this class, the 70-minute period, would be establishing what the objective is for the day, maybe modeling certain writing, going through equations, doing the very teacher-centered section of that lesson, and then there might be chat rooms, there might be things going on, and then the second part of the lesson would be where we would be utilizing the breakout rooms where teachers can visit, and they can meet with small groups. So that's really our thinking for for if we had to go to remote. But that it would be a lot more, again, students, I'm sorry to say this to you, but you would need to be up and at 'em at 8 o'clock in the morning, because that's when the day would start and teachers will be expecting you. And they'll be taking attendance and really looking forward to seeing all of you.
Thank you, Ms. Klein. Any questions from the board?
Things like OSR and Okra, those would be meeting during those club periods?
So OSR meets before school.
Right.
So the 9th grade group meets before school, and so does Okra. The 9th grade group meets before school. The other, and so they actually would have a pre-period here.
They would have, okay.
Yeah, they would have a pre-period, and we're still in discussion about the music, because I mean the music, the guidelines around music are different, right? But if we're in remote, it doesn't really matter. So will they be having groups in the morning? That's something that Dina Madden and the administration at the high school are still talking about.
Thanks, Liz.
Any other questions? Great. So thank you certainly for our building administrators for just setting the table to provide just the details of both our remote and hybrid models. I just want to move on because I know we want to get to the public's questions. For us, as I mentioned, the next step is to submit our plans and to publish them tomorrow. If we can compile all the information and submit on time. As I mentioned in the beginning, we expect next week to distribute a family survey to understand individual family intentions for students, as well as assess technology needs and plan for the distribution of devices and Wi-Fi during the month of August. We think it's critical as a next step to get some clarity around questions about the ability for students to commit to a plan is to assess the enrollment changes and revise our cohort schedule. So part of our methodology is to put out our plans so they're clear to our families, to ask about intentions, to get commitments so we really understand the level of enrollment that we can plan for. Knowing that how we organize sections and designate teaching within the elementary, middle, and high school is critically important for the planning purposes. We know we have a lot to and continue to work on our operations, our logistics, as Ms. Klain talked about, all the work of how we organize arrival, dismissals, transitions, and protocols, procedures, including our code of conduct and expectations for students and families, and work through our AUP for technology as well. So we expect to revise our reopening plan. In my note to families as an introduction, it's important to look at these plans as living documents that they're going to change, revise, and evolve over the course of the next 5 weeks. As Ms. Klain mentioned, we plan to ask our building administrators in mid-August to schedule building-based meetings for parents. We think it's important to wait for Governor Cuomo's announcement because depending upon what he decides and determines, we want to tailor those meetings to really speak to the situation that's unfolding over the next several weeks. But we do think having the opportunities for consistent parent information meetings at the building level will give our building administrators the opportunity to field questions and speak to specifics to a particular building over time. And so there's a lot more work that lies ahead. And we have to recognize that people need to be patient with us. Again, if you think about all the planning we've been doing behind the scenes, both on our facilities, our models for learning, professional development, technology, nutrition, and transportation, we recently received guidance less than 2 weeks ago from the state and Department of Health. And so a lot of this was anticipating what we need to plan for. Now we know, and we still know that there's a lot that still needs to be clarified over the next few weeks that we can refine our plan and move forward together. So at this point, I'm going to turn to the board. Certainly we appreciate the resilience and support of our families, the level of communication and questioning that has been presented by parents and students and staff over the last several weeks. We know we want to continue to create that feedback loop and provide as much information and detail on the website as possible, given what we know today, what we need to know in the future. So Rena, Paul, I turn things over to you and to the board.
Yeah, does anybody on the board have any additional questions? I know I want to leave time for public questions. I think the last count, Paul told me we had about 19 people in the waiting room. If you're currently in the waiting room or after you ask your question, if you're in the waiting room and want to ask the question, stay in the waiting room. But if not, if you would leave the waiting room, that would be helpful. I'm just going to very briefly read excerpts of our public participation policy.
Before you do, go ahead, Christian.
I just wanted to make 2 brief statements, but Sam, go ahead.
I just wanted to know, I know it's we don't have definitions on this from the state, but had there been any more dialogue about childcare and the issues of the working parents? And
I would say this, and I want to hats off to Sylvia Wallach. We have been working with number one, the Boys and Girls Club's New Rochelle. We recognize that the challenges that families are facing. Working families, single parent guardians, complex issues around the challenges of families. And I want to say that, our planning and thoughtful approach to this is not perfect. And we recognize that it can't be perfect under these conditions and that there are a myriad of challenges and problems. That being said, we're doing everything we can to create structures of support at the building levels through our partnerships with an organization like New Rochelle Boys and Girls Clubs to look for ways to support families, both for after and before school care, and to recognize what they need as well. I want to say this, and I don't mean to answer, but even in looking at comparative districts, and I said at the beginning about districts are all unique in the challenges they have and the constraints. We felt it's critically important and feel strongly that a daily connection to school, in-person learning, is the best as we look at the first 60 to 90 days of school, not knowing what may happen. We also know, because of the school calendar between federal holidays, religious observances, so on, that the full day, if possible, AABB schedule will really provide for interruptions of a consistent routine of school for students. Because you have several weeks where there are 4 days of school in all the way through November. And so we looked at and calculated and tried to remain true to the idea of the routine. Finally, especially with our younger learners, given the fact that this is going to be different conditions of learning, that the ability to move through the school and have this varied experience is not going to be part of our routine per se. That students are going to be in a school setting, they're going to be limited through social distancing, that going through a full day for a young elementary school student developmentally within restricted conditions will be very difficult starting out. And we feel that the half-day model provides for that focus on learning, a really kind of deep dive into literacy and mathematics in a small setting, a lot of attention by the teacher, and we feel that developmentally that is a good place to be when there's been this long disruption of in-person schooling. So again, I appreciate all the comments and feedback from parents that will continue. This is what we believe is the best foot forward for our system at this time, and we're going to reevaluate and see what happens as things unfold.
Bob, can I just add to the childcare for a second?
Yes.
I just want to let everyone know that the survey, we sent out a survey this afternoon from the Boys and Girls Club of New Rochelle to ascertain the interest in childcare. So if people could check their email and get that back, that would be very much appreciated.
Kristen, I know you had said you had.
Yes, first of all, Bob, thank you, and to you and the team for putting all of this together. Clearly a lot of thought went into it, and we truly appreciate that. Really quick, before we go into questions, I just wanted to pivot for a second to in regards to racism and equity, because I know this is continually an ongoing situation that we are dealing with in our district. So I just wanted to say that I had an opportunity to discuss with Rena the matter pertaining to several requests from stakeholders within our community, people and organizations we know that are serious about doing the work, to have a sit down with both yourself and the board. And I was encouraged to hear Rena's resolve in prioritizing this within upcoming weeks, and an opportunity for us to all sit down and designate a time to meet with our partners in the community who are invested in the success of our students of color. I also hope in the near future, when social restrictions are lifted, we can gather at the Community Resource Center to hear from those on the ground and provide an opportunity for all of us on this call to openly discuss the ideas and possible proposed solutions and just engage in conversations. I'm sure that our partners at the CRC will welcome an opportunity, and even perhaps our friends at the MAS PTA could join in the conversation. But nevertheless, Rena, thank you so much for your leadership and commitment in holding these conversations. Secondly, really quick, I had the pleasure of attending a 2-hour workshop around 400 years of oppression and inequality.
Sorry.
Which was hosted by the Coalition of Understanding Racism Through Education. And it was a gathering that emphasized the value of historical context and created a space for those who are normally comfortable to be uncomfortable. Our facilitator, Dr. Angel Acosta, sought to educate and strengthen the foundation of our cultural awareness by allowing us to metabolize the history we have with racism in our nation, in order to make ourselves vulnerable to express our experience with hate within our community. It was refreshing to see how this work clearly aligned with the work that you have already done, Dr. Shaps, with your team of administrators and teachers. So just as Dr. Acosta stated, great progress in the fight against inequality has always been achieved through coalition. And as you can tell, I was a bit encouraged to see how this movement is growing organically. So in short, this is the energy I think we need to harness to move forward together. And this year, with all the challenges that we have, to also keep this in mind. But thank you again for everything that you're doing.
I know that we don't have a lot of time, but
yeah, sorry, Gladys, I want to be sure that we allow time for all the questions on remote learning. Just to let the community know that there's going to be communication, and we discussed this in the communications committee, from Dr. Shaps outlining the work that's been done and outlining meetings that will take place in the future. And Gladys, as our board liaison to that district equity team, at a future board meeting, we would love to have you report on your experience with the equity team. I want to be sure to give that conversation the time it deserves and not rush through it.
But Rina, my question is not about the equity team. I just
wanted to put that in there after Christian spoke.
Yeah.
Go ahead, Gladys.
I will do the report next time about the equity, and thank you. This question is from Nora. I know maybe tonight is not going to be the time, but just I want to put it there. Reading the New York State special education regulations, they say that we cannot classify a student that they lost the skills, of course, but they're going to be facing the same difficulties. For instance, somebody that's being with a 504. So what the district is planning for these kids, because they're going to be like with the same need, but not classified. So something to consider for next meeting to discuss.
Yeah, I mean, I'll just say, Gladys, I think it's a really complex formula to think about, right? If we take it out of this venue and we pretend we're not in a health crisis, we would say, if we're going to evaluate a child, we have to make sure they've had academic intervention support first, right? So that's in a regular environment. Now we're saying, let's not solely make a determination on eligibility based on the traumatic impact of COVID-19. Let's work to help that individual repair so we can see, is it a function of a temporary disability, so to speak, or is it more organic that requires classification in special ed services? But you're right, we're going to need more guidance and we're going to take it slowly and carefully, but building level supports are critical to get in place right away so that we can start to determine those things.
Okay, yeah, because we're gonna see kids that they kind of quit to school since April. So 5 months that they really, it's a great period of time that they lost some skills.
But you're right, and all kids have suffered that to some extent, and that's why one of the most important things to recognize in all the building schedules are the pockets of time they have in for small group work and differentiation. Because the first thing they're going to have to do for all kids, classified or not, is find out where they are, find out the degree to which they've experienced slide, as Andy was speaking to, and plan how to differentiate. So that small group opportunities at HOMICs, office hours, those are all critical in getting that first stage of support in, so we know what kids need. Right now, it would just be a guess.
Thank you.
Thank you, Nora.
Sure.
Any other board questions on remote learning and the hybrid models? Okay, give it a second. All right, we are now going to move to our public comment and questions. I know that we have gotten a number of questions from the community that were posted on our website, and also questions that came into the board. Anyone who wants to speak, just state your name and your elementary zone. And I'm trying to not read too much of this. We're going to keep remarks and questions to 3 minutes to ensure the opportunity for others to speak. and to facilitate as many people being able to ask the questions as possible.
Can I just,
President,
sorry, Rita, I just want to just interject. I just want to make sure, based on the level of detail of the questions, we may not answer that question this evening.
right.
So to use this as a vehicle to share this information in response to our FAQ, but I just want to be mindful of that.
Yeah, no, thank you for that, Bob. That I think I'm gonna stop there. Everybody knows the board will not permit in public session comments involving individual district personnel or students. And I'm going to kick it off to questions. Paul,
Yep.
I think we have how many people sitting in the waiting room now waiting to
So
ask
we have
questions?
17. Yeah, we have 17 right now. So this is how I'm going to do this. So I'm just going down the list. I will admit you. I will say your first name. I will admit you, and then you can ask your question. And you're going to probably most likely have to unmute yourself when you get into the participation meeting. So that's how we're going to do this. So I'm going to start out. So it's going to be Molly. I'm going to admit you right now. Can you hear us, Molly? I hope. I see you here.
Her audio is connecting.
I don't see a microphone next to her.
I see Molly Smith is connecting to audio is what I see right now.
Okay.
You want to use your internet audio, I believe?
Yep.
Paul, maybe we should move to someone else while she's connecting.
Yeah, I can move. Molly, what I'll do is I'll move you back into the waiting room. And then I will go to the next person to see if, hold on. Okay. We'll try the next. So I'm going to admit Cara Pezzo. I hope I pronounced your name correctly. Let's see if that's going to work. I see you, Cara. You're in the participation room. Can you hear us?
LMC, if you could talk us through this, is there something that our participants should be doing?
Admitting people through a waiting room, I'm not particularly familiar with. I don't know. Right now I see Cara is connecting to audio. It's probably something they should be getting a prompt asking them to connect to audio.
Cara, you can also move to the chat feature if you want to press the chat button and chat out your question.
The best thing to do, Cara, is to connect to internet audio if you're on a laptop or your phone or an iPad.
Paul, do you have a security thing where is it checked off that she can like unmute herself? Could her audio be blocked?
Let me see.
If you go into.
No, I don't see.
Enable participants to unmute.
Yeah, I ask all.
She's gone.
She's gone.
All right, let's move on.
Yeah, it's.
While you're letting people in, I'm going to ask one question that I know has come up from the public while you're working on this, Paul.
Okay.
For individuals who have children in multiple schools,
Yes.
Is there going to be any sort of ability to try to coordinate the schedules of those students, and how would that take place?
I think the challenge there, we certainly are mindful of that, is that we have this rotating afternoon morning session schedule. So it will be difficult, especially at the high school where you're talking about 33%. We are looking at families that have multiple siblings to see if we can honor consistency within a particular school. But unfortunately, because the structure of our AM PM groups, it may not be possible.
And special education services would definitely preclude being able to do that for sure.
I'm looking at my settings. All my settings are good. I don't know.
Let's
Want to try the next person?
I'll
Yeah.
try the next person. Okay,
And-
so I'm going to go to, so Gloria Rodriguez is next. I will admit her. There you go. And Gloria, actually, I see a microphone next to your video camera. So if you unmute yourself, you should be okay.
You should also be able to unmute her, possibly.
Yeah, you can unmute her.
Yeah, I'm asking.
Try up in the right-hand corner, the little blue box.
I'm on my iPad, so it's a little different with the, no, I have every.
Yeah, Gloria, could you try to unmute yourself? Is there do you see a button up on the top to unmute yourself?
You use the chat feature.
Yeah. So we're going to ask people to, unfortunately, something doesn't seem to be working, to just write out your question and use the chat feature. And then we'll monitor those and get back to those. Meanwhile, apologies, Gloria, we're going to move to the next person, see if it works with one more individual.
The only issue is I don't know that you can chat while you're in the waiting room. So, all right, let me, I will go to someone else. So I will try to go to Margarita.
Up to unmute yourself.
She's good.
You use the chat feature.
Yeah. Okay, Margarita. People to, unfortunately, something doesn't seem to be working, to just write out your question and use the chat feature.
Okay.
Get back to those. Meanwhile,
So there's a delay.
Gloria, we're going to
Looks
move
like.
to the next person, see if it works with one more individual.
The only issue is I don't know that you can chat while you're in the waiting room. So, all right, let me, I will go to someone else. So I will try to go to Margarita.
Just so everyone's aware, there's probably a good 30, as you just realized, there's a good 30-second delay, if not longer, between what's being broadcasted. I guess in the future, anybody else who's brought into the meeting, if you can mute the TV or however you're watching the meeting, just so we don't have this audio.
Paul, if we let everybody in at once and they just ask their questions one by one, can we do it that way?
Certainly, I can let everybody in. Sure. Okay.
And then just call on them one by one.
Yep, I will admit all then.
Oh, Margarita just said she had no question.
Oh. Margarita, no, okay. So let's see. We can go to Daly. You're next. Daly, can you hear me?
I can hear you. People to turn off their stream.
Yes, and actually, what would be great is if whoever's not asking the question, could you guys mute? I let everybody in, so whoever's not asking the question, if you can mute, that'd be great. So we can get rid of the background. Go ahead, Daly. Go ahead. Sorry.
Sure. My question is rather with the elementary school, it seemed that the scheduling didn't provide for any science or social studies. Was I missing something there, or was that inherent in one of the other classes?
Annie, would you like to answer that?
Sure. Was that specific to the elementary school?
Yes.
That was the question? Yes. So as Dr. Melnick mentioned, in the first phase of reopening, our plan is really to focus first on social emotional reconnection of kids, as we've been emphasizing, and then also to assess kids beginning in literacy and math. And for that first phase, which we're looking at the opening weeks of school in September and into October, we've prioritized that given the short amount of time that kids are actually with us in school. And then, as Colleen mentioned, we envision phasing back in the other components of the curriculum, science and social studies. We use the Science 21 curriculum published by Putnam Northern Westchester BOCES, as well as the integrated social studies curriculum, also published by Putnam Northern. So we're trying to set realistic goals for those opening days of school in order to really get kids reconnected and to assess where they stand in terms of literacy and math skills first as a foundation.
Okay, thank you.
Thank you, Delia. So I'm going to move you back into the waiting room then. Okay. Next, we'll go to so Andrew and Stephanie Lazarus. If you could unmute. Looks like you guys are muted for your question. Can you guys unmute?
I think the delay is really impacting.
Okay.
In the chat room, it seems that there's a repeat of anyone who's presenting a question.
Okay. All right. So I will go. All right. Then I will go to the next person. Dr. Way.
Hi.
If you have, oh, go ahead. Yes, great.
Can you hear me?
Yes, we can hear you. Thank
Okay,
you so much
first
for
of
your
all,
patience.
thank you. Thank you to all of you. You've put in such long hours and you've shown such care. We all care too, so thank you. I'm Henry Way. I'm a Central Zone parent, and I'm also a primary care physician, and I'm the medical director at Google. And please, please, please believe me, at Google, we recognize Mamaroneck as one of the most engaged, progressive, and equitable communities for classroom technology use. So my question is, how can people like me help? Like techies who know how to troubleshoot Zoom or Google Meet or YouTube live streams really well. And let me give you some context. If you've ever been to the STEM day at the high school, our community has hundreds of people just like me who want to contribute time, funding, equipment, cupcakes, you name it, or expertise. Look, I'm a doctor. Our district's doctor, Dr. England, she's probably been really busy. Mental health professionals like me want to help. We can review CDC, OSHA, AAP updates. We can help inform clinical policy, like for vulnerable households, even fully remote models, while attending to the mental health of our children. So my question is there one central place that makes sense for us to sign up, indicate more details, like if our employers offer matching gifts, for example, or like matching cupcakes? You get the idea. Thank you all so much again. We really appreciate what you do, and we really want to help. And I like cupcakes a lot.
If I could just say thank you very much. I appreciate your support for the schools. I would say we continue the conversation offline and talk about technology and our thinking, and certainly give feedback around your relationship with Google, around Google Meets and some of the advancements and features that they're rolling out. The sooner they can roll it out and get it operational, we will support in our use as well. So thank you.
Okay. Next, I will go to Athena. Can you unmute? Let's see if we can hear you, hopefully.
Hi, guys. Can you hear me?
Yes, we can.
Awesome. Also wanted to reiterate thanks. I think a lot of planning went into this, and we appreciate it. One question I had is, when will the protocols and policies be communicated around if a child is exposed or possibly exposed? We didn't mention that at all. I don't know that that was the point of the meeting today, but I am curious on when to expect to understand that better, so we can make a more informed decision on whether we feel safe sending our kids.
So, Dr. Mazzoni, you want to talk about that? I mean, I would just say, as part of our plans, we need to cover all aspects of health and safety. And so there will be detailed information about that. Because we've been operating our extended school year program currently as an in-person, we've put together the protocols and had to go through conversations, and I don't want to steal Dr. Musoni's thunder, but conversations
Go right
with
ahead.
the Department of Health in how we process and work through the contact tracing, identification of potential case, through the health screening and so on and so forth. So all that work will be, is memorialized in the plans, but the details in terms of our protocols will continue to roll out. And that's in coordination with, again, health agencies, Dr. England, our district physician, our nursing supervisor, and all our staffing. But Dr. Mazzoni, you can add to that.
Yeah, no, I mean, you did it perfect justice. I'll just say that as we've said before, the beauty of running an extended school year program is we had to work all this out and try it all out. So we've worked very closely with medical personnel. We've written protocols of what to do when kids arrive at school, when things are reported to us, and we actually in one dealing, we're told by the DOH that it was handled, you know, at the top of their expectations. So it's all written in the reopening guidelines. And as Dr. Schaap said, every week we're getting new information. Dr. England, Dina Murphy will work on updating it with myself, and it will be live up on the
And I also
website.
want to just add, if I could, you know, we also, through Director of Facilities Steve Brugge and Sylvia Wallach, we've been provisioning in terms of resources and materials around health and safety. Also working in our ventilation system to optimize the flow of fresh air. All of this stuff is through the planning process. So our goal is to prioritize safety, to communicate that, to make sure that everyone understands the protocols so there's no confusion. And obviously we have to adhere to privacy around identification, notification in the event of, but we have worked through this through our ESY, as we said, and parents, staff members have all been communicated on a need to know, but an immediate basis.
Thank you. Okay, next we will move to Iona. Can you unmute and you can ask your question?
Hi, my name is Ioana Baldini, and I'm a parent of an incoming student in kindergarten for Central School. Thank you all for the hard work, and thank you to Dr. Wei. He put me in a much better mood than I was before with his offer to help. And here I am with my offer to help. I have a PhD in computer science and engineering, and I can help you with any STEM related activities that you need. I want to get involved in any STEM activities that I can offer my help with. And I have some questions for now. As you can imagine, I'm concerned as I don't understand much about how school in normal situations look like, let alone in this type of situation. And I have some questions about when we are going to know more information about class assignments, teachers, AM versus PM, or any information we can be provided as new parents in new school districts, immigrants in our situation, such that we can plan. We are a working family. My husband also works at Google. I work at IBM Research, and we are trying to figure out what's going to happen to our situation. We are fortunate enough that we can work from home, but still there is a lot of planning that needs to be done. So I would appreciate any information that you can provide. Thank you.
Dr. Melnick, I don't know if you want to touch on from your view. I will say that the first step, and thank you for your questions, is to survey parents immediately next week. I think decisions around, we have already asked our building administrators, for example, at the elementary level, through the normal process of placement and just planning for our regular school, to organize our classes based on our class size guidelines, anticipated enrollment projections, and sections. That being said, by getting a clear understanding next week in terms of school intention plans, it will allow us to revise and assign and make groups within our grade level sections so that we then can communicate to parents where we're at. And Dr. Melnick, I don't know if you want to add to that.
Thank you so much. Just to add to that we are starting the placement process by following the normal process that is in place. So for new students, for new kindergarten families, or for all new students, I should say, we look at the parent input forms that parents complete at the time of registration, and we create what we hope to be balanced cohorts of students in every class, in every grade at the elementary level. The challenge this year is that we will be following that process, but then we're going to have to split our placement into even more sections than we've had in the past. And so as you may imagine, that's going to take even more time than it usually does. To Dr. Schaap's point, we have discussed this as a full elementary admin team, and we are hoping to provide that information as soon as we can to parents, but we don't expect that we're going to be able to provide this until after we receive results of the survey. And so I would say that we're shooting for mid-August to be able to provide information for all students, all elementary students, about class placement, et cetera.
Thank you. Let us know if we can help with anything. And I'm very serious about helping in STEM. So please, who do I contact to learn more about how I can help?
I have the feeling Dr. Schaap's wrote your name down already.
Certainly, I would appreciate the opportunity to talk with you. I would say we've said publicly, not to take us off this conversation, we're in the planning stage of the high school for a design lab that's going to focus on the integration of engineering, architecture, computer science, our design program. So that is a wonderful starting point in addition to our K-12 commitment to STEM learning as well and robotics.
It's my opinion that we have to start as early as possible to introduce these kids to what is available with computers, and especially to advertise it to kids from not so privileged households. And in particular, we have to encourage girls and women such that I'm not the only technical woman in the room.
I would agree, and I could expand just the background information, how from K to 12 we have those opportunities in place and look to further expand them. So I will be in touch with you.
Thank you very much. My email is ioana.paldini@gmail.com. I'll be waiting for your email.
Thank you.
Thank you. Okay, next we'll go to, it's Jennifer's iPhone. So Jennifer, can you hear us? Looks like you're still muted, Jennifer. I don't know if you can unmute. All right, we'll come back to you, Jennifer. I will move on to the next person. Mr. Atkins, Sean Atkins, can you hear us? Looks like you are muted as well. See if I can unmute you.
Mr. Atkins just mentioned he has no question in the chat.
Oh, okay. Okay. So we'll move on.
But he says thank you to everyone.
Okay. Thank you for monitoring that, Bob.
Rena, I don't know if you wanted to say something, but you were muted.
Okay,
I can chime in while we're waiting. I heard from Gloria Rodriguez, who was trying to pose a question earlier. Gloria is actually one of our teachers, and she actually has sort of a question and a comment about with remote learning or any synchronous but remote engagement, how that's a challenge with our youngest learners in particular, and just the challenge of children who don't thrive as well in that synchronous online environment. So I think that's an important caveat. I mean, as always, I think we're so hopeful around the opportunity to launch the year with our hybrid, to really get to know each child as a learner, what areas of comfort are, what are areas of stretch or discomfort, so that we can be as responsive as possible, and obviously doing that in full partnership with our teachers. So I just want to thank Gloria and the other teachers that have been
I don't know if they addressed that just by second address. Here are my questions. So I don't know if they're addressing now. I want to ask them about standardized tests being offered in the high school. So I'm going to jump on that.
Ben, is that you?
I'm going to speak to the board right now. It's live. Yeah. Well, keep it.
Ben, can you hear us? Mr. Zofnis, can you hear us?
Yes, sir.
Okay, go ahead. You are live. Go ahead.
First and foremost, let me start this video so I can see you guys as well, and you can see me. First and foremost, I wanted to thank all of you for putting in such a phenomenal effort and being such a support system for the community. My daughter is going into 3rd grade at Central School, but my wife and I both went to Mamaroneck School, and we have a substantial appreciation for everything that you're doing from the top down. So first and foremost, thank you. I have a question, and it pertains to standardized testing as it may be offered in the high school. As many of you may know, I have a company called Zofnis College Prep that prepares many students in the community for tests like the SAT and ACT. There have been test cancellations recently, which obviously has been very difficult for students who are prepared to take those tests. My question is, will there be non-essential services, so to speak, offered through the high school for tests like the SAT, ACT, subject tests, etc., so I can prepare my students properly?
So, Mr. Officer, I appreciate the question. I was just going to jump in and answer because I've worked with the high school administration and planning. Our challenge, unfortunately, is that we too are very sensitive to providing our students the opportunity to participate in the standardized assessments like the ACT and SAT. We have historically been a test site regionally where students from across the area sign up. The difficulty of late, and this happened in early spring and then recently with the ACT, is that the College Board mandates that we are a test site. And so a perfect example is we had over 250 individuals who signed up for the ACT for the administration at the high school. But because the College Board will not allow us to limit participation to our students, the difficult choice is to understand that we have to prioritize the safety for our children and our staff. And so because we can't discriminate, so to speak, that is to just support the test site for our students, the challenges of protecting the health and safety had caused us to cancel. We were one of the few areas where we're optimistic and hopeful to provide this opportunity, but we had students signed up as far as Ohio, New Hampshire, different states that had quarantine measures in, and we could not risk allowing individuals without any understanding of health history into the schools. And so I've asked directly to the regional representative for the College Board if in fact they want to provide individual communities with the opportunity to provide testing for students, to change their policy. The College Board is quite a thriving organization. They have the ability to change their protocols. They will allow a test site from each community to support and administer tests for their students in order to heighten the safety of our students and staff.
Sure.
And so it is a challenge, unfortunately, and I'm disappointed because we did have a number of our students who signed up locally, but we have to make a decision in the best interest of health and safety. And I feel you fully understand that.
Of course, 100% understood. Well, I appreciate taking the time. Thank you very much for answering the question. I will relay that information to the families with whom we work. And again, I can't thank all of you enough for the time and the effort that you've put in to securing the safety of our children. Really, it's incredibly appreciated. And to hear everyone's voice and collectively come up with what you think is best for a very opinionated community, as to be expected, and make sure everyone is safe. I sincerely, for one, appreciate it.
Thank you, man.
I'm signing off. Thank you.
Thank you. I'm going to try to go back to Molly again. And Molly, I don't know if you can hear us, because I do not see a microphone by your name. Molly, if you want to, if you have a question, if you can chat, you could certainly put it into chat if you would like, but I do not see a microphone by you. So,
Paul, while we're waiting for Molly, I have a question from Stephanie Andrew, who tried in earlier. Stephanie Andrew Lazarus, or Central School area. Their first question was, can the high school kids at home have a buddy in school to ask their questions in live time? I know a bunch of private schools are doing this.
We had talked about, and I think there's a lot of creative or innovative ideas around having older students serve as mentors. partners. We have our National Honor Society, other students who I think would get in line to provide that kind of mentorship or partnership. And so I would say it's a wonderful question, and we want to engage the students. We know also through our Tech Mentor program, and the Tech Mentor program is part of the STEM Alliance, that creating opportunities for young adults, for teenagers to elder students to model and mentor is something that we're really looking for creativity.
Right. I think, Bob, I think their question was more the idea that a fellow student in the same class live time, if there was a question, could then write that student.
Yes, I mean, I think these are all creative of kind of internal solutions for students that we would want to support. Dealing with the complexity of that blended environment, how we can help teachers and help students help their colleagues.
Okay. And the follow-up was also, would they reconsider using Wednesday for teaching and not advisory? The kids really will only see their teachers one period a week.
I think as Ms. Klein, I'll let her in. I think we're referring to the high school. I would say that, or the middle school, that we're looking certainly at that 50% alternating days, or eventually at the high school to ramp up to 50% if possible. So it is in school every other day. You know, if we can work through the logistics of 33 to 50%.
Okay. One more person came in. So, Jen, can you hear us? Jen Gonzalez.
Hi, yes, can you hear me?
Yes. Hi, Jen. How are you?
Yay, hi, I'm good. I'm actually a bit overwhelmed considering I have now one in the elementary, one in the middle, and one at the high school. So it's a lot to process, but I'm going to focus on middle school for now. I have two questions. One is regarding Dos Caminos. How is that looking like with the 9 periods? How is this handled with their schedule? And two, what was my other question? Are the children moving classrooms in between their periods, or are they staying in one classroom? That's it.
Annie and Dr. Saki, would you like to talk about Dos Caminos, Annie, and maybe Dr. Saki about the travel between classrooms?
Sure. Hello, Mrs. Gonzalez. Thank you for your question. So in regards to Dos Caminos, part of what we're looking to do going into next year specifically is we are going to have the students actually mixed into all the other teams. So they're not going to necessarily be together all the time, which I know that that's part of what parents had been requesting. So with our new schedule, we are able to do that, but still provide the students with the supports that they need. So in terms of ensuring that there is appropriate staffing to support the students in their other academic classes. So this is probably going to be the first time that the students are in their regular general education classes with support. So the support is still going to be following the students. In regards to students moving throughout the building, this has been a work in progress. You know, and even as early as today, we were having discussions about, you know, what makes the most sense. You know, we're obviously trying to limit the amount of movement that occurs within the building among students. So part of our conversation has revolved around how can we cohort students in such a way that maybe by grade level and by team within one section of the building. So, you know, God forbid anything is to happen, we can kind of quarantine off a section as opposed to the entire building. So those are some of the things that we have been thinking about. We're going to be continuing conversations on that particular piece. But again, I think we're looking more to have kids in separate sections of the building, but by team and by grade level.
Yeah. All right,
Hopefully
thank
that
you
answered your
so much.
question. You're
Yes, and thank you so much to you guys, everybody, for all your hard work that you're doing. We really appreciate it.
You're welcome. Thank you.
Thank you.
Paul, you're muted.
Hi, sorry about that, guys. Sabra, I saw you joined in. Can you hear us? Sabra, can you hear us?
I can hear you, Paul. Hi.
Oh, hey, Sabra, how are you?
I'm good, thank you.
Good.
Is
Go
it
ahead.
okay? Okay.
Yep.
I didn't have anything to say. I was just signing in to listen
Okay.
in. Okay, thank you.
Yeah, of course. Good to hear from you.
You too.
And I'm gonna go back to Molly one more time. I don't know if Molly, if you can hear us, or if you want to put in the chat. Once again, I didn't see a question from you come through the chat, so I'll give you 20 more seconds, maybe.
Yes,
Yeah, I don't see a microphone near her, so.
I just want to say, yeah, I'm
Well,
sorry,
hold on,
Paul.
Bob, just hold on one second, Bob. Molly, if you have questions that you want answered, just please feel free to email the board. Or obviously you can go onto the website and also ask questions through the inbox as well. So go ahead, Bob. Sorry.
That's all I was going to say. I obviously, with the technical
that.
glitch, we certainly have the FAQ, but we want to be mindful of the time, but also to respond to any questions that may not be presented this evening.
Paul, do we have anybody else waiting in the chat room to ask a question?
We do not.
Okay. Again, I want to thank all of the administrators who have been working on this. I know it has been around the clock effort. I want to thank all of the parents for your questions. We realize that we all know that this is not the situation that anybody wants to be returning to in September. And we all wish things were different. And we appreciate your questions, your patience, and as well as your suggestions. And as Dr. Schaap said, there will be more opportunities for questions with building principals. This is a lot to process. So I very much related to what Jen Gonzalez said when she said this is a lot. It is a lot to think about and work through. So, thank you all, and to all of you who have worked with various groups of parents and students. Just a really heartfelt thank you. Bob, anything else you want to say before we close it out?
Again, I appreciate the participation this evening from our building administrators. Thank you for your presentations. I appreciate the questions from parents and the support. We have a lot of work to do, and we are in this together. And I think we want to say, especially to our teachers, we understand the challenges that lie ahead. We have incredible respect for the professionals of our teachers, their commitment. We know that they'll be successful. We're there to support in every way, and the community will step forward together and put our best foot forward. And so we look forward to the opportunity to share our plans. We're hoping that we can edit our version of our plan tomorrow and meet the deadline, to be honest with you, and see if we can respond to questions that come up in the coming weeks. So thank you, stay safe, and we appreciate the commitment and effort by everyone.
Thank you all, and good night.
Make a motion to adjourn.
You gotta make a motion. Make a motion.
Sam, see, you earned your paycheck again. Can I have a motion to adjourn the meeting?
So moved. A second, Paul.
All in favor?
Aye.
Good night, everyone.
Aye.